ACT 10 Science Test Taking Skills here at Sandhook Early College High School. First, before we begin, there's 10 things you must know about these science tests. Please know that this test is more manageable than you think. After all, basically it's an open book test, just like the reading test. So even if you don't know science that much, you can still score pretty high if you just discipline yourself and work hard. On the test, the ACT science test will always be the fourth test that you take. It will have 6 to 7 passages with 5 to 8 questions each. You're going to have about 35 minutes to complete it. But tip number 1, master your timing. Set a timer next to your work on the ACT science practice test and see how you can stick to those checkpoints. See if this is the ideal timing for the actual exam. So look at the bottom. Those are some ideas to time yourself. Tip 2, have an overall exam strategy. If you're not strategic, how do you expect to pass? So when you're taking the ACT science test, please know questions like, well, why is this experiment set up the way that it is? Well, what are the differences? What are the similarities? Just know, circle detailed words in the question, such as not, experiment 1, table 1. Do not be afraid to underline. Do not be afraid to circle. Three, what are your no commonly used terms? So for an example, we need to know what the independent variable is. Well, that's what the scientist tries to change on purpose. The dependent variable, that's what the scientists are measuring. But what is a constant? Well, constant is the same. So what is a direct relationship versus the indirect? Well, direct will be the independent variable increases or decreases, and so does the dependent. It does the exact same thing. Indirect is if the independent decides to increase, well, the dependent will decrease, and vice versa. Tip number 4, trends continue. When asked about a data point that is not explicitly shown on the table or graph, you can assume that the trends presented in the passage will continue. So do not be afraid to draw in your test book. I cannot explain that enough to you. Do not be afraid to highlight. Do not be afraid to circle. Draw little things, arrows, whatever it is. Do not be afraid to use your book. So always refer back to the passage. Now, the thing is, you can't memorize everything that you just probably read in just seconds. You probably have a summary in your head, but it's not word for word. So make sure you read to understand the gist of it. And as well as when you go back to your questions, locate the information back inside the passage. So read the question, go to the passage. Okay, circle it. Because memory alone will not be suffice. You actually need to jot down maybe a few little notes, maybe circle again, draw arrows, put some dots, put little bullet points and say, hey, this was important. Practice your timing. Like, do not wait a day or two or a week or two before the test to try to say, oh, let me go ahead and study. Let me go ahead and get my timing right. Like, no, you have to train yourself. Things become a habit once you do it so much. So make it a habit of trying to test yourself a passage at a time and give yourself a little couple of minutes. Number 7. Know the ACT science question types. There's 3 types. We have interpretation of data. So when you do that, it's going to examine your tables and your graphs. Evaluation of models, inferences, experimental results. You make judgments about theories, data, and other scientific information. Scientific investigation, understand the reasons behind any experimental setup. Tip number 8, mark that passage up. I'm telling you, as I already said, this is my 3rd time. Underline, circle, make small notes. This is a type of note taking that is efficient to help you stay focused on your target as well as pacing yourself. So again, maybe look at the similarities and the difference. Well, see what someone said something and they ask a specific question about something. Circle it. Make sure you can find it. Go back to the questions. Go back to the passage. Number 9, adopt a strategy for each of the 3 formats. So there's 3 forms. You have the data representation, you have conflicting viewpoints, and you have research summaries. You will need to modify your approach slightly for each one. So every time you have to do something a little bit different. Say, for instance, data is focusing on graphs and charts and tables, and you're going to need to be able to identify like the variables, the units, maybe the trends. Then we have the conflicting viewpoint. So basically, this is where it doesn't have no diagrams. It's just passage reading. You have to understand what you're reading. So look for particular words. You also need to understand the purpose, method, and results for each experiment. So if you're doing a research summary, you're looking over these, you have to understand what's taking place. So don't treat all 3 as if it's just the same. Make sure you treat them like they're unique. And number 10, know that the ACT science passage types are research summary. You're going to have 3 of those. Data representation, you're going to have 2 of those. And conflicting viewpoints, you're going to have 1 of those. So research summary is a series of experiments. Data representation, you're going to have to present information about a topic, so understanding what's being there. And conflicting viewpoints, discuss multiple theories about a single topic. Now, if you need any more help, contact me or Mr. Payton. Brandon_Payton at hcsk12.ncus or Shantae.cheek at hcs.k12.nc.us. This information was given from captest.com.